Good evening. Welcome to the Festival of Books in the Alleghenies 2020 Virtual Author Series. My name is Hilary Hauck and I will be your co-host this evening along with Sharon Hostetler. Hi Sharon, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Good, thanks. Also with us tonight, but working the Zoom and Facebook controls behind the screens, a little bit like the Wizard of Oz, is Dave Pop. Thank you for making this happen, Dave.
Hello, Hilary.
Hi. Before we introduce our featured author this evening, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Festival of Books in the Alleghenies. We are an annual event rotating between the historic towns of Bedford, Somerset, and Evansburg in the Laurel Highlands of Pennsylvania. In addition to featuring 50 local and regional authors, we put on a full day of events in the beautiful downtown areas, although if we're in Somerset, we are uptown. Many of our activities during the day are hosted in partnership with local organizations such as the Southern Allegheny Museum of Art in Bedford, the Bedford Fine Art Gallery, Acorn Artistry, and Laurel Arts, just to name a few. We also have a full day of events in the children's tent. We have face painting and balloon making and dress up. We have STEM activities, story time, and these events are all put on by the authors, local organizations, and of course, our local libraries. I have a few news updates to share about our local libraries here in the three counties. The Bedford County Library opened earlier this week. They are, of course, enforcing safety guidelines. Somerset Summer Quest is putting on events Monday to Friday, including newspaper club, creative writing, field trips, and family fun. Cambria County Summer Quest readers have already logged 50,000 minutes of reading time this summer. Well done to everybody participating in that. And if you have little ones who love stories, be sure to tune in to Evansburg Library's Happy Tales with Haley every Saturday. It's delightful. If you've donated to your local library, we thank you for your contribution to literacy. We also thank all of our local libraries for all they do for literacy, for children, for the community. We urge you all to continue to contribute, to donate to your local libraries in these difficult times. We will give shout outs to our local libraries every week during this author series, which takes place every Wednesday at 7 p.m. And if you would like to share a story or have us recognize your local library, why don't you email us at info.arfb@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you want updates, if you want to keep on following us every week, please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for updates about our featured authors. And one more thing I'd like to share is the Central Pennsylvania Festival of the Arts Book Fest began its program today. There are still 2 full days to enjoy their featured author sessions and 3 days of arts. Find out more about the Book Fest and their virtual merchandise booth on the website arts-festival.com. And that is all for me. For the moment, I'm going to hand you over to Sharon.
Hi, it is my pleasure to welcome Richard Fellinger. Richard is an award-winning author of literary fiction, a former journalist, a writing fellow at Elizabethtown College. He is a native of Altoona and a graduate of the University of Pittsburgh. He lives in Harrisburg with his wife and son. Richard will read from the first chapter of his forthcoming novel, Summer of '85. It is literary fiction, the story of a mass shooting and an old summer love. It will be published next year by TouchPoint Press. The first chapter won the Novel Excerpt Contest at Seven Hills Review and appeared in last year's edition of the journal. Thank you, Richard.
Hey, thank you guys. Just big thanks to everyone for being here on this steamy summer Wednesday. Really, really happy to be part of this.
We're so happy to have you, Richard. All right. I believe you recorded a segment in advance for us.
Yeah, I taped my reading of the first chapter of Summer of '85, my next novel, coming out next year. And I assume it's going to be ready to go here in a sec. Hi, I'm Rick Fellinger. I'm a writer from Harrisburg, and I'm a writing fellow at Elizabethtown College. I'm a native of Altoona, PA, and this is my second festival of books in the Alleghenies. So big thanks to the folks at the festival for having me back, and big thanks to you for tuning in tonight. I'm going to do something a little unusual. I'm going to read from a forthcoming novel rather than a published novel. My second novel is coming out next year, and I'm really excited about it. It's titled Summer of '85. It's the story of a mass shooting and an old summer love, and it is being published by TouchPoint Press. It has already been published in part, just the first chapter. It won the Novel Excerpt Contest at Seven Hills Literary Review, and it was published last year in the review. Here's a copy of it. That's available on Amazon, by the way. My other two books are a novel titled Made to Break Your Heart. This is a novel of fatherhood and baseball, published in 2017 by Open Books. And my short story collection is titled They Hover Over Us. It's a collection of stories about the people from the Pennsylvania Rust Belt, people from towns like Johnstown and Bedford, Somerset, Pittsburgh, and Wilkes-Barre. And that was published in 2012 by Snake Nation Press after it won the Serena McDonald Kennedy Award for Literary Fiction. So on to Summer of '85. I'm going to read the first chapter, which was published in the Seven Hills Literary Review. So that chapter is published, even though the whole book is going to come out next year. I hear about the shooting while driving home from the office. I'm tuned to a country station, and after a ditty by a guy singing lovingly about his truck, the DJ comes on and promises traffic and weather. But first, she has breaking news. In her bumpkin voice, she says, "News out of Philly isn't good, not at all. It seems there's been a shooting in Center City, at least a dozen possible victims. It's being described as an active shooter scene at a hoagie shop. We'll have more as we get more information, but now, the traffic." I get home and click on CNN, toss my jacket on a chair in the corner. Wolf Blitzer is doing a voiceover as a helicopter camera pans an entire city block at dusk, red police lights swirling. It's hard to see much in detail, except police cars parked at odd angles, the heads and shoulders of cops and ambulance workers rushing around. As I settle into the couch, with a mushy pillow propped behind my back, our three-legged terrier hops up on my lap and licks at my hands. His name is Wimpy, born without a left front leg, but that doesn't stop him from bouncing up on the furniture. We found him as a puppy 3 years ago at a local rescue, and though Stacy had her heart set on a chocolate lab, I saw the three-legged pup and talked her into adopting him. I realize he wants his dinner right now, but he'll have to wait. I want to hear what Wolf has to say. Details are still sketchy, Wolf says, but the scene is a hoagie shop called Billy G's. My wife and I have been there before, only once during a weekend getaway to the art museum a few years back. The place is famous for its Italian pork, and while the Center City shop is the flagship, chains have popped up across the region from Atlantic City to Harrisburg. The shooting started at the dinner hour. It's unclear who the shooter is, Wolf says, or whether he's still alive or on the scene. An unarmed Middle Eastern man was seen running from the block immediately after the shooting, but his connection to the shooting, if any, is unknown. An eyewitness from a bakery across the street saw one masked shooter carrying an assault-style rifle. inside the hoagie shop, but police have not yet confirmed it. We live in Harrisburg, where I'm editorial page editor for the local newspaper, The Telegraph. We're 2 hours west of Philly, close enough that we might expect some local connection to the story. Maybe even a local victim. I log onto my phone and check our site, which links to a one-sentence news flash from the Associated Press. It says nothing I don't already know, but promises updates soon. I text our editor-in-chief, Norm Baker, asking, "Need anything from me?" A few minutes later, I get a reply. "Not now, just sent 2 reporters to Philly. Start thinking about follow-up editorials." As dusk turns to dark, CNN is still showing the street scene from above, and even less is discernible now, mostly just whirling red lights. Wolf hands the coverage to Aaron Burnett, who then hands off to Anderson Cooper. Anderson interviews a former FBI guy, a retired police commissioner, and the author of a book on mass shootings. They discuss police tactics, ruminate on whether the shooter is still at large or might be holding hostages, and speculate about the possibility of terrorism, but nobody really knows anything. Then Anderson interrupts the author, urgency in his voice, and says there's word the shooter is down, apparently killed himself in the back kitchen of Billy G's. Police believe there's only one shooter, but they still want to question the Middle Eastern guy. Then comes news of a reaction from the president. He tweets, "Sending thoughts and prayers to the victims and families in the Philly shooting. Law enforcement is on the scene, doing a fantastic job." There was a time when I would have been on the way to that bloody scene. Back when I was a younger cops reporter. That was before I was promoted to assistant city editor, then editorial page editor, a 9-to-5 job that I secured 5 years ago. Now I'm stuck in the first grips of middle age, married with no kids, sitting only with our dog in our quiet twin home in uptown Harrisburg, watching the scene unfold from my tan Creighton barrel couch, my favorite soft pillow cushioning my back, my only duty to think about follow-up editorials and feed the dog. So finally, I feed the dog, let him out to pee. Meanwhile, I warm up a leftover plate of lasagna. Stacy comes home, keys dangling in her hand, and sees that I'm tuned to the coverage, plate in my lap. Wimpy hobbles across the room and paws at her knees, tail wagging giddily. "Can you believe this?" Stacy asks. She's a campaign pro, working this year for a Republican Attorney General candidate, so she often comes home late. She eases into the couch beside me, still wearing her jacket, still holding her keys. We gawk at the screen together for a moment, shake our heads in disbelief. "It happened at Billy G's," I say. "Do you remember going there for lunch?" "Of course," she says, and there's wistfulness in her voice, as if it reminds her of a different, better time. I sleep fitfully, wake up early the next morning, make coffee, and open my laptop at the kitchen counter. By now, we have details. The Telegraph's website has a full story from the 2 cop reporters Norm sent to Philly. 11 people dead, plus the shooter. 8 more hospitalized, and 3 are critical. No cops injured. All 19 victims were patrons or employees of Billy G's, but police are still notifying victims' families and have not yet released any names. The shooter is identified as Bernard Lazaro, 26 years old, who was recently fired from his job as a cook at Billy G's. No word yet on why he was fired. He lived with his mother in southwest Philly. He toted 1 AR-15 semi-automatic rifle and a 9mm semi-automatic pistol. No word yet on how he obtained the guns. I lug my thermal mug of coffee into the newspaper office, mulling another editorial on gun control. I also have to give careful consideration to when to run it. File it for the next day's paper or wait a day or 2. There's good reason to wait, especially in conservative central Pennsylvania, where I'm a bit of an outlier. In a region full of farmers, hunters, and evangelicals, my politics are center-left. My readers often call me a dyed-in-the-wool liberal, and some even call me a socialist. So I don't want to be accused of politicizing another gun tragedy before the tears are dry. Besides, I need job security. I'm at that age where it's prudent to plan for retirement, which is why I recently upped my 401k contribution to 10% of my salary. Whenever possible, I'm conflict avoidant, and I'm okay with that. I've seen enough of the world, and I know my place. So I'm inclined to wait. Late morning, Norm comes by my desk. He's a spindly guy with mussy gray blonde hair and John Lennon glasses. Looks more like a history professor than a newspaper guy. But in fact, he's a newspaper lifer who's well liked in the newsroom, even though he's often steamrolled by our number-crunching publisher. Yet during years of declining ad revenues and staff cutbacks, Norm has held the newsroom together pretty well. So what are you thinking for editorials, Norm asks. Something respectful for tomorrow, I say. Something about the need for the community to come together. Then the next day, another call for gun control. I want to wait a day on that so we're not accused of pushing an agenda before the smoke even clears. Sounds good, Norm says agreeably. He's an agreeable guy. After he leaves, I play a few games of computer solitaire, and I lose most of them. Eventually, I open a new Word document and start drafting the next day's editorial, checking the wire every now and then for updates about the shooting. More details trickle in as the day crawls along. Lazzaro's car, an old Chevy Malibu, is found in a parking garage down the street from Billy G's with more guns in the trunk. His Facebook photo circulates on the wires. He's a small-shouldered and baby-faced guy, and in the photo he's wearing a gray t-shirt and holding a handgun across his chest. He's a white guy, and on his Facebook profile, under political views, he lists Confederate. His mother is refusing to talk to reporters, but investigators say she's cooperating with them. Police also say the Middle Eastern guy seen running from the scene had no connection to the shooting. Almost half the victims are identified, but none are from the Harrisburg area. They're from the city or its inner suburbs, such as Cherry Hill and Conshohocken. At Thomas Jefferson University Hospital, one critical victim is upgraded to stable. In the newsroom, Norm instructs our two reporters in Philly to file one more story with all the latest details and then drive back to Harrisburg. We'll run Associated Press follow-ups after that. My editorial for the next day begins with the obvious. Once again, it says, a community has been ravaged by gun violence, this one fairly close to home. Then it segs into a passage about remembering the victims, then one about the need for the community to come together to heal. It finishes with a plea to government officials at all levels to work together to end gun violence, but it's vague enough that it shouldn't offend anyone. All in all, I must admit, it doesn't say much. At the afternoon editors meeting, when I lay out my editorial plans for the next couple of days, there are yes nods all around the table. Even Marcia Barber keeps her trap shut. As managing editor, number 2 at the paper behind Norm, Marcia is our most outspoken Second Amendment sister. She's a stout woman with stringy hair who lives south of town on a hillside in York County, and her husband is an avid hunter and Civil War reenactor. Maybe I've silenced her today by proposing to wait a day until pushing the gun control button, or maybe, as a reenactor's wife, she's embarrassed by the revelation that there are murderous kooks out there still claiming an allegiance to Confederate politics. Late afternoon, more details. Lazzaro, who had no criminal record, bought all of his guns legally. He was fired from Billy G's a week ago for repeatedly making insensitive racial remarks on the job and had been warned previously. He wore a long black jacket as he mowed down his victims, and he likely concealed the AR-15 under the jacket as he marched from the parking garage to the hoagie shop. He donned a black ski mask outside the door. His neighbors describe him as a quiet guy who rarely ventured outside, except to shovel snow or take out the trash. I file my editorial and head home to feed the dog. I'm back on my couch, Wimpy in my lap, sipping a scotch when Stacy comes home. Unlike last night when we were both stunned by the initial news of a mass shooting 2 hours away, she's in a scrappy mood. So, I suppose you'll be running another gun control editorial tomorrow, she says, hanging her jacket on the coat rack in the corner. No reason to wait for the blood to dry, right? Actually, we're going to let it dry, I say, stroking the dog's back. For a day at least. Wow, she says, and you call that editorial restraint? I like this side of her, always have. My wife is no Second Amendment sister, but she's a loyal and feisty Republican. I'm a lifelong Democrat, or Dummocrat, as she likes to call me, And when we first met 10 years ago, we found ourselves bantering like this all the time. So our relationship immediately had a James Carville, Mary Madeline quality, or at least the flirtier version, Joe Scarborough, Mika Brzezinski. Stacy's 5 years younger than me, but she's as smart as she looks with her tortoiseshell glasses, bob-style brown hair, and cuddle-with-me face. Unfortunately, we don't jest as much as we used to, or cuddle. Time has straddled our marriage with all the usual little problems. Plus, I say in my best deadpan voice, another gun control editorial means less work for me. All I have to do is cut and paste the last one from the last shooting and call it a day. I don't think anyone will even notice. Ha ha, she says mockingly. She plops onto the opposite end of the couch and puts her feet up on our origami coffee table. After a minute, she pulls out her phone and fingers it. On CNN, Anderson Cooper is about to cut to commercial, but first, he asks his viewers to watch a video collage of the names and photos of the victims. I sip my scotch, sort of paying attention, as names and faces fade on and off the screen against the soundtrack of soft piano music. The last name and face stun me. It's Kara Cassidy. Curly reddish hair, green eyes, dimpled cheeks, light freckles. There are age lines in her skin, but she's still beautiful. My God! I lunge off the couch, spilling scotch on my pants, sending the dog tumbling to the floor. What is it? Stacy asks. I dated her, I confess, pointing at the screen. I'm too jolted, too unnerved to say anything but the simple truth. One summer, years ago. Kara's face fades to black, then a Hyundai ad. So that's the first chapter of Summer of '85, coming out next year from TouchPoint Press. Big thanks for tuning in today. Feel free to check out more of my work at www.richardfellinger.com or more titles from TouchPoint Press at www.touchpointpress.com.
Wow, Richard, that was very powerful reading.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a serious book. We live in serious times, and that's what I'm writing.
I have a couple questions, if you don't mind answering them.
Fire away.
So was there a real inspiration for the book? Was there a happening that led you to pursue this particular?
Yes, sort of, but I can't remember exactly what it was, and it was several degrees of separation from me. I got the idea from this book after my wife and I were just sitting around talking one night, and she said a friend of hers had a relative who knew someone in one of those mass shootings, and they learned about it on the news, and it just got, and I just said, oh my God, can you imagine? And can you imagine learning this, someone you knew at one time? And then the wheels got turning, and I thought, okay, what if it was someone really special? And so I thought, how about an old summer love? And I took those, and I took that, and I ran with it.
That's great. I'm just going to interrupt a minute to all our viewers. If you have questions for Richard, now is the time to put them in the comment section, whether you're watching on the webinar or on Facebook.
I see also that you have a book called Made to Break Your Heart about baseball, a favorite among a lot of writers, and a collection of short stories. So I was wondering if the writing process is different for you when you're working on a collection of short stories as opposed to working on a novel.
It was very different. And in fact, I wrote all of my short stories while I was a newspaper reporter. I lost that job in 2009. I was downsized during the Great Recession, which is something that I used as inspiration in that novel, Made to Break Your Heart. But I found I found that while I was still a newspaper reporter, short stories came to me easier. And then after I lost my job, I thought to myself, it's time to try something long form. And also, I mean, to be honest, the fact that short stories don't sell after I lost a job kind of said to me that, dude, you can't afford to write short stories anymore. You got to try to write a novel and try to sell something. Now, not that literary fiction sells a whole lot better, but that was my thinking at the time when I went from short stories to novel. I have not written a single short story since. Maybe I will try again. When I was in college as well, I studied at Pitt under the late great Chuck Kinder, who was a writer and a beloved Pitt professor, and best friends with Raymond Carver, the great short story writer of the 20th century. And so, short stories were something that I was drawn to when I was young, and something that I stuck with when I started dabbling in fiction myself as an adult. But then once newspaper stories were behind me, and that job was behind me, I tried to think differently. And ever since, I've been working on long form stuff for the most part. I also still dabble in nonfiction from time to time.
That's fantastic. I have a few messages from some viewers. Facebook greetings from Denise Weaver and Jennifer Diamond. Hi, good to have you with us. Denise says, great, Richard. That is a compelling beginning. I look forward to reading the book when published, and congratulations on the Novel Excerpt Contest win.
That's very nice. Thank you.
And I'm going to give a question of my own. First of all, a comment. That was a very compelling excerpt, and I love the tragedy and then the mundane, feeding the dog and paying into your 401k. That was really well done. And I'm really intrigued by the husband and wife, different political parties, because sometimes the political divide seems to be getting bigger. So that will be very interesting to see how that progresses and can be done. So, but my question is, what was that leap like going from journalism to fiction?
Well, I started writing short stories while I was still a working journalist. I think I published my first short story in 2005. It's titled "The Cousin Couple." It's about a couple of Pennsylvania first cousins who want to get married, and in Pennsylvania that is against the law. And it appeared in a small journal in Oklahoma, published by titled Westview, published by Southwest Oklahoma State University. So I was still writing those short stories while I was a journalist. So the jump was more from when to dive into that first novel, and I had the idea. Actually for a memoir of a little league dad, because at the time I was raising my own son and I was coaching his teams, and I found out I had some really, a mix of really funny and really tragic stories about coaching youth sports. And I was still in grad school at the time at Wilkes University, and I was up there for a residency, and some of my friends and professors said, man, you got to write this. This is a memoir. So I took a stab at it, and I wrote a chapter or two, and then I soon discovered my life just wasn't interesting enough for a memoir, even though I had these really interesting, little anecdotes. So I decided, okay, change gears completely and start making stuff up, turn it into fiction. So that novel is based somewhat on my own experiences, but it is primarily fiction. So that's how that shift happened for me. I hope that answers your question.
So I have a question. How do you juggle writing and teaching?
Well, it's not easy. I teach at Elizabethtown College. I teach a full load, and I also oversee our writing wing, which offers all sorts of writing help, mainly tutoring. But I try to write a little every day. Isaac Dinesen, author of Out of Africa, said, write a little every day without hope and without despair. I have that tacked above my desk in my basement. And sometimes it's a paragraph, sometimes a sentence or two, but if I can plug ahead, just keep plugging a little bit every day. I find that eventually things start to come together. It's not always easy. I mean, when you're teaching full time and have a family, there are some days that I have to start grading papers right away, or if they're going to get graded. So those are days that I have to forego writing, but there aren't many days like that. I'm not able to write a little every day like Isaac Dinesen advised, but I'm able to write a little most days.
Excellent. Wow, that's great. Little each day. So we have some questions coming in. Lynn Carol Hughes says, Rick, how has COVID affected the writing process, if at all?
Yeah, I'm glad. Hi, Lynn. Thanks for asking that. I'd like to know what other writers have to say, and I'll tell you what I have to say. It has affected me because it's been weighing on me. I've been able to write a little bit this summer. I have another work in progress. It's a complicated one, so I've been doing some revisions to try to pull it together as I move, approach the halfway part of the first draft. And I'm still trying to write a little every day, but I haven't been able to write a lot. And that seems counterintuitive because you would think, we were locked down in March and April and May, and you would think we have all this extra time. So that means writers should have all this extra time to be cranking out all sort of stuff. But writing is a thoughtful and a reflective process, and it's the kind of thing you need to let your mind wander to get at. And when there are other serious things constantly weighing on your mind, and and you have to constantly think about things like, where do I walk, where do I stand, what do I touch, where do I breathe? I've had some trouble letting my mind wander into my writing, but I'm plugging away, and I'm still getting a little done. But I'd love to hear what other writers have to say about that too, by the way.
We should make sure we ask them every week at the author series.
I have a question about the three-legged dog. Was that a real dog?
No. The three-legged dog. I was just trying to add something, something interesting. What's the old one? When in doubt, have someone show up in the room with a gun. I didn't want to have someone show him in his room with a gun. I already had a gun, so when in doubt, maybe throw in something like a three-legged dog to keep things a little interesting.
That actually leads well into the next question, and this is from a featured author from the first session, Alan Roth. Welcome, Alan. As a teacher of writing, Rick, what advice do you offer your students on character development?
Oh, on character development. That's a good question. Yeah, well, I teach a short story class at Elizabethtown, and character is the very first concept we address, and we start out by doing little craft pieces on various elements of fiction, character, dialogue, point of view, setting an image, and yeah, I start with character because character is the heart of it. So advice on character. I have a tip sheet that I give my students, and it includes everything from avoiding cliches to show don't tell. Action shows character. Dialogue shows character. I tell them that it's okay to write what you know, but try to let your imagination go with it. Just like I started that memoir about a Little League dad, and I didn't think it was a memoir. It could carry a memoir. So when I turned it to fiction, I let my imagination go, and I created a character who's different from me in many ways, much more impulsive than me, much more likely to get himself in trouble than me. I'm not that interesting. So those are some of the things I tell my kids. I hope that answers your question.
So Richard, what do you think? Is there going to be baseball this year?
I'm afraid not. I mean, I know that Major League Baseball is moving ahead with plans to start on July 23rd. But I'm afraid not. I'm afraid more players are going to continue to test positive. And that's going to complicate things, especially in hotspot states like Florida, Texas, and Arizona, which have several baseball teams. And if players continue to test positive, what does that mean for their teammates that they've been around? I read the other day that there are already problems with the testing, that it's moving too slow, and therefore the players who are being tested are being quarantined longer. So I'm doubtful. Another thing I could see them starting, and then so many problems ensue that they have to lock down again, like the NBA did and the NHL did in March. That's another scenario that I could see playing out.
Yikes. One more political question, if I may. This is from our wizard behind the screen, Dave Pop. He's curious to see if you use the different political views of the character and spouse to further explore the gun issue. If yes, you either change their mind at the risk of giving some spoilers.
Yeah, I do. I delve into that. Listen, it's a book about a mass shooting. I think in many ways it can be compared to a book about a war. The great war books like The Thin Red Line and The Naked and the Dead by Norman Mailer. They're essentially anti-war books. I think it's fair to say that my book is essentially an anti-gun book.
Good to hear. Okay. If there are any more questions, Richard, could you pop over to our Facebook page after? And if anyone else has any questions, would you be
Sure.
there? Great, thank you.
I'm going to take the time, Richard, to thank you for participating in our virtual Festival of Books this year. And we will very much hope to see you when we have a live one in Evansburg next year. But before we go, do you have any good news that you could share with us?
I'm here and I'm hanging in there. I mean, it's a pandemic, and I'm hanging in there. That's the best I can do for you right now. And I suspect a lot of other folks feel the same way.
And you are right about that. So where can our viewers purchase your books?
Amazon, easily on Amazon. That's probably the best way to do it.
Okay. What is your local library system?
Dauphin County Library System. Yeah, they're great. They had me for a reading for my last novel. Let me give them a shout out. I'll try to connect with them again next time.
Okay. And do you have any special messages for our viewers?
Hey, keep reading and read what you want, read what you like. That's one of the messages I share with my students all the time. Don't feel that you need to. I think college students come into college thinking that they're going to meet professors who are always pushing Shakespeare and Hemingway and Faulkner on them, and I love Hemingway and Faulkner, but that's not all I read. And because I read what I read a lot, I read what I like. Yeah, I read Hemingway, Faulkner. I read literary fiction. I read commercial fiction. I read history. I read sports. Read what you like. Keep reading. Enjoy it, and I think you'll get a lot out of it.
Excellent. All right. Again, thank you so very much, Richard. Perhaps you'll join us as a viewer next week when we're going to host author Liz Miller on, mystery writer. Very happy to host her. And thank you to everybody tuning in to listen to us today. Hope you've enjoyed it. We certainly have. We've really enjoyed having you with us, Richard.
Yeah. Hey, thank you. It was awesome. Really grateful.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all of our viewers as well.
All right. Good night, everyone.